My wife smiled while she signed the divorce papers. That perfect, practiced smile she used to convince everyone she was the victim. She thought she had won. She thought she had taken my company, my house, and my reputation. But what she didn't know was that the multi-million-dollar company she was stealing from me was never actually hers to take. And the moment she realized that moment happened live on camera in front of 300 of her closest colleagues. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start at the beginning. Because to understand how I ended up smiling while she cried, you need to understand how I first ended up crying alone in the dark.
For 12 years, I believed I had the perfect life. My name is Mark, and I was that guy. You know the one. Happily married, 2 beautiful kids, a dog, a mortgage, and a growing tech company that I had built from nothing but a laptop and a dream. I met Sarah at a coffee shop in downtown Austin. She spilled her latte on my shirt, and I made a joke about how I needed a reason to buy a new one anyway. She laughed. And I swear, in that moment, I thought I had found my person. We dated for 2 years, got married, and for the first 5 years, it was magic. I worked 16-hour days to build my software company, Logan Tech. I named it after my son, Logan. Sarah supported me in the beginning. She said she believed in my vision. She held my hand when I almost went bankrupt. She told me that we were building a future together. And I trusted her with everything. My bank accounts, my company passwords, my fears, my secrets. Everything. I remember thinking, this is what success feels like. Not the money, but having someone in your corner. We bought a beautiful house in the hills. We took family vacations to Florida. We had dinner parties where Sarah would hold my arm and tell her friends how proud she was of me. Or, at least, that's what I thought she was doing. Looking back now, I realized that while I was building a company, she was building an escape plan. The first red flag was so small that I talked myself out of it. It was a Tuesday night about 3 years ago. Sarah started keeping her phone face down on the table. When I asked her why, she said she was tired of work emails. Made sense, right? Harmless. But then came the late-night texts. Around 11 p.m., her phone would buzz. She'd glance at it, smile for just a second, then put it away. I asked who was messaging. She said it was her sister, who lives in Chicago. I believed her. Why wouldn't I? Then came the behavior change. Sarah used to kiss me goodbye every morning. Suddenly, she was leaving for work before I woke up. She said she had early meetings. I remember standing in the kitchen one morning, holding 2 coffee mugs, realizing I was the only one drinking coffee anymore. The biggest red flag, the one I should have paid attention to, was the night I tried to be romantic. I planned a surprise dinner. Candles, steak, the whole thing. When she walked in, she didn't smile. She looked annoyed. She said, "Mark, you should have told me. I had plans." "What plans?" She just shook her head and said, "Work stuff. You wouldn't understand." That phrase cut deeper than I admitted at the time. You wouldn't understand. She was already building a world I wasn't invited into. And the worst part? I blamed myself. I thought I was working too much. I thought I was neglecting her. So I tried harder. I bought her flowers. I took the kids on Saturdays to give her a break. I thought if I just loved her enough, she would come back. But she wasn't going anywhere. She was just getting ready to destroy me. The truth didn't come out in a dramatic argument. It came out through a bank notification. I was sitting in my office, going over quarterly reports, when I got an alert from our joint savings account. A withdrawal of $50,000. $50,000. My heart stopped. I called Sarah immediately. She didn't answer. I texted. No response. So I called the bank. They told me the transfer was labeled legal retainer. Legal retainer. My wife was hiring a lawyer. I drove home like a madman. My hands were shaking. When I walked in, Sarah was sitting at the kitchen table with a man I had never seen before. He was wearing a very expensive suit and holding a leather folder. Sarah looked at me without any emotion, like I was a stranger walking into her house, not her husband of 12 years. She said, "Mark, this is David. He's my attorney." I remember laughing. A real, confused, nervous laugh. I said, "Attorney for what?" And then she slid a piece of paper across the table. It was a divorce petition. She had already filed. She said, "I want the house, primary custody of the kids, and 51% of Logan Tech." 51%. She had done her homework. She knew that if she took 51%, she would control my company. The company I built with my own hands. The company named after our son. I couldn't breathe. I looked at David, the lawyer, and he wouldn't even make eye contact with me. That's when you know you're in trouble. When the other side's lawyer won't look at you. I asked Sarah why. Just one word.
Why?
And she said something I will never forget. She said, "Because I'm tired of being second place to your business. I'm taking what I deserve." But here's the part that shattered me. I found out the full truth a week later. The real betrayal. See, I hired my own lawyer, a pit bull named Cynthia. And Cynthia did some digging. Those late-night texts. They weren't to Sarah's sister. They were to David, her lawyer. They had been planning this for over 8 months. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was that Sarah had been siphoning money from Logan Tech into a shell company. For 2 years. She had been stealing from me while smiling in my face, while kissing me goodnight, while telling me she loved me. And then Cynthia dropped the final bomb. Sarah wasn't just leaving me. She was leaving me for someone else. A man named Brad. A guy she had reconnected with on Facebook. An old friend from college. He had already moved into a condo she bought with my money. That night, I sat in my car in the garage for 3 hours. I didn't cry. I just sat there, staring at the wall, because I realized that the woman I married never existed. It was a character she played, and I was the fool who believed the performance. The lowest point didn't happen in private. It happened in public. And that's what made it so humiliating. Sarah filed a temporary restraining order against me. She claimed I was volatile and emotionally unstable. It was a lie, a complete lie. But in family court, accusations are enough. I was ordered to leave my own house. I packed a single suitcase while my son Logan watched from the stairs. He was 8 years old. He asked me, "Daddy, why are you leaving?" I didn't have an answer. I just hugged him and said, "Daddy will be back soon." But I didn't know if that was true. I moved into a cheap extended stay hotel off the highway. The kind with stained carpets and a broken ice machine. I remember lying on that bed, staring at the water stain on the ceiling, and feeling like my life was over. My kids thought I had done something wrong. My friends started picking sides. People I had known for 20 years suddenly stopped returning my calls. Sarah was smart. She controlled the narrative. She told everyone I had become obsessed with work and abandoned the family. She played the victim perfectly, and I let her, because I was too broken to fight back. For 3 months, I barely functioned. I went to work, but I couldn't focus. I lost a major client because I missed a deadline. My business partner, a guy named Steve, sat me down and said, "Mark, you need to get your head in the game or we're going to lose everything." I looked at him and said, "Steve, I think I've already lost everything." I remember driving to a bridge one night, not because I wanted to jump, but because I wanted to feel something other than pain. I stood there in the cold wind and thought, what if I just disappeared? What if I just drove away and never came back? My kids would be sad for a while, but they'd move on. Sarah would get everything. She would win. And that thought made me angry. Not sad. Angry. For the first time in months, I felt something other than grief. I felt rage. Clean, cold, focused rage. I got back in my car, drove to the hotel, and opened my laptop. I didn't sleep that night. I made a list. Every lie Sarah told. Every dollar she stole. Every person she manipulated. And then I called Cynthia, my lawyer, at 6 a.m. I said, "I'm done being the victim. What's our play?" Here's what Sarah didn't know. And when I tell you this, I want you to understand why her smile disappeared on that final day. When I started Logan Tech, I was young and paranoid. I had watched my father lose his business in a divorce when I was a kid. My mom took everything just like Sarah was trying to do. So when I incorporated Logan Tech, I did something smart. I created a holding company, a separate entity that technically owned the intellectual property, the patents, and the software code. Sarah knew about the operating company. She thought that was the whole thing. But she didn't know about the holding company, because the holding company was never in my name. It was in a trust. And the beneficiary of that trust? My son, Logan. And my daughter, Emma. Sarah couldn't take 51% of Logan Tech because I didn't own 51% of the real asset. I was just a licensee. The real owner was a trust that Sarah had no claim to. And I had set this up 10 years ago, long before she ever thought about leaving me. But that wasn't my secret weapon. My secret weapon was a man named Frank. Frank was our former CFO. Sarah had fired him 2 years ago because he asked too many questions. But before she fired him, Frank had copied every single financial record, including the evidence that Sarah had been moving money into that shell company. I met Frank at a diner outside the city. He slid a USB drive across the table and said, "It's all there, Mark. Every transfer. Every fake invoice. She's looking at felony charges." I didn't smile. I just took the drive and said, "Thank you." For the next 6 months, I played dead. I let Sarah think she was winning. I let her bully me in mediation. I let her make me look weak. She had no idea that I was building a time bomb. And I was going to detonate it in the most public way possible. The day of the final divorce hearing was sunny.
Too sunny for what was about to happen.
Sarah walked into the courtroom wearing a cream-colored dress and a smile. She thought this was her victory lap. Her lawyer, David, looked confident. He had no idea what was coming. The judge called the case. Sarah's lawyer presented their terms. Full ownership of the house. Primary custody. 51% of Logan Tech. And then the judge looked at me and said, "Mr. Thompson, does your client agree to these terms?" Cynthia, my lawyer, stood up. She said, "Your Honor, we have a counterproposal, and we have evidence to present." Sarah rolled her eyes. I saw her. She actually rolled her eyes. That's how confident she was. Cynthia approached the bench and handed the judge a thick folder. The first page was a summary of the shell company transfers. The second page was the holding company structure. The third page was a letter from the district attorney's office confirming they were reviewing the case for potential fraud charges. The judge read in silence for what felt like an eternity. Then he looked at Sarah's lawyer and said, "Counselor, was your client aware that the intellectual property of Logan Tech is owned by an irrevocable trust for the benefit of the minor children?" David, the lawyer, went pale. He stammered, I was not aware, Your Honor." The judge turned to Sarah. She wasn't smiling anymore. Her face was gray. She looked at me with pure hatred. And for the first time in a year, I smiled. Cynthia continued, "Your Honor, we are asking that all assets be divided as follows. The marital home will be sold, with proceeds split equally. My client will retain full ownership of the operating company, and the holding company, as it is a trust for the children, is not subject to division. Furthermore, we are asking that my client be awarded sole legal custody, given the evidence of financial misconduct by the other parent." Sarah stood up. She shouted, "That's a lie. He's lying." The judge banged his gavel. "Sit down, Mrs. Thompson, or I will hold you in contempt." She sat, and I watched her world crumble in real time. But the best part, the absolute best part, happened after the hearing. As we walked out of the courthouse, there was a reporter from the local business journal. Sarah had invited her. She thought she was going to give an interview about how she took down her greedy husband. Instead, the reporter walked up to me and said, "Mr. Thompson, is it true that your wife is under criminal investigation for embezzlement?" I looked at Sarah. She was standing by her car, crying. Her perfect cream dress suddenly looked cheap. And I said, loud enough for the reporter to hear, "I'm not allowed to comment on an active investigation. But I will say this, the truth has a way of coming out, especially when you plan for it." The final blow didn't come from a judge or a lawyer. It came from my son. A year after the divorce was finalized, I had full custody. Sarah was allowed supervised visitation twice a month, but she rarely showed up. She had moved in with Brad, the guy from Facebook, but that fell apart within 6 months. Turns out, Brad didn't want to raise 2 kids that weren't his. Shocking, right? Logan and Emma were adjusting. They still had pain, of course, but we were healing. I had cut my hours at work. I coached Logan's soccer team. I made pancakes on Saturday mornings. I was learning how to be a dad without a partner. One night, Logan came into my room. He was holding a photo of Sarah and me from our wedding day. He said, "Dad, why did Mom try to hurt you?" I sat him on the bed and said, "Buddy, that's a complicated question." He looked at me with those big eyes and said, "My friend Jake's parents are divorced, but his mom doesn't go to jail." Why did Mom go to jail? She had served 60 days for fraud, a plea deal, misdemeanor charges in exchange for restitution. She had to pay back every dollar she stole. She had to sell her condo. She had to get a job at a department store because no one in tech would hire her. I looked at my son and said, "Your mom made some choices that hurt people. And when you hurt people, there are consequences. But she's still your mom. And she loves you. She just forgot how to show it for a while." Logan hugged me, and then he said something I will never forget. He said, "Dad, you finally look happy again." I cried. Not sad tears. Relief tears. Because he was right. I had lost my house. I had lost my money. I had lost 12 years of my life to a woman who never really loved me. But I had gained something better. I had gained my freedom. And I had gained the chance to be the father my kids deserved. 6 months later, I sold the operating company for $8 million. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to start fresh. I took $2 million to buy a smaller house, a place with a big backyard, and a tire swing. The rest went into college funds for Logan and Emma. I also started a new business, a consulting firm that helps other entrepreneurs protect their assets before they get married. I tell them my story, not to scare them, to empower them, because the system is not designed to protect the person who builds. It's designed to protect the person who takes. Sarah lives in a small apartment on the other side of town. She works retail. She posts photos on social media trying to look happy, but she's not fooling anyone. The last time I saw her was at Logan's school play. She looked tired, older. She tried to talk to me, but I just nodded and walked away. Not because I'm bitter, because I have nothing left to say to her. She used up all her words on lies. And I used up all my forgiveness on survival. Here's what I learned. Revenge is not about destroying the other person. It's about building yourself back so strong that their destruction becomes irrelevant. I didn't win because I made Sarah lose. I won because I stopped letting her define my worth. She took my love. So I took back my life. If you're watching this and you're in the middle of your own storm, if someone has betrayed you, lied to you, or tried to take what you built, hear me clearly.
You are not weak.
You are not broken. You are just temporarily knocked down. And the only way they win is if you stay down. I spent 6 months on that stained mattress in that cheap hotel. I thought my life was over. But it wasn't over. It was just beginning. Because sometimes, losing everything is the only way you finally become unstoppable. My name is Mark. And I didn't get revenge. I got something better. I got peace. Now, if you want to learn how to protect your own business and your own future, check out the link in the description. And if you made it to the end of this story, comment the word unstoppable. Let me know you're still standing. I'll see you in the next video.